video. Welcome. EU Continentals are this week. So of course, like every content creator has to do a video on it, and I want to. So yeah, it's coming up. If you're doing the LCQ, if you're lucky enough to already be qualified for the Continentals, like well done. And please make sure, no matter how technical things sound and people taking it as serious as they do, just always try and enjoy it. It's just a really good experience. I was fortunate enough to do the European one, and it was just a great experience, like something you'll remember for your lifetime, really. And yeah, just enjoy it. But as we get into sort of the technicals, a lot of people are going to want to meta predict. Know what's the best list, what's the best thing to bring, what am I looking out for, what are the good tech cards to include. And of course, the caveat that covers all of that, in my opinion, is bring the deck that you're just the most comfortable on. If you're going to be in the LCQ, you've got to do 5 rounds of best of three, and you can't mess up any of those rounds. You have to win all of them. In the main event, you have to do 7 rounds of best of two, or two-game format, or whatever it's called. And three of those have to be 2-0, and then the rest, I believe it's 3 to 4 of them have to be 2-0, and then the rest can be splits, so you have to also perform very well there. So I think overall the caveat, no matter what I say from this point forward, is if you're very comfortable, like you're a Blue Steel Wheel player, or you're a Ruby Amphis player, or you're like this player, bring that list because that's what you're good at. Just always is like a good rule. What you're comfortable on, you know how to play the deck when it doesn't work, you know how to play when it does work. So yeah, just I think everyone knows that caveat is a very good idea. But going into actual sort of predicting and stuff like that, especially in your LCQ, I think we have to first start looking at the European one, which actually at this point has been quite a while away, and we have seen some new updates, and I'll go through the new updates as well, and the new lists and things like that have come down, and the new developments in the meta. But we have to look at these lists, look at what was presented, and this isn't LCQ data. But I played in the LCQ, and there was a real mix mash. It felt like the Swiss that you'd expect in a DLC, in my opinion. It was free. It was open for anyone to attend. So you had people trying their luck with their own lists if they were lucky enough to get a ticket. You had people that were trying to predict the meta, and you had all the people who were just, they're like, I'm a Blue Steel player, I will bring Blue Steel. As I did myself, I did bring a particularly different list. There wasn't a meta call on the day, that was just what I was feeling most confident with at the time, so I went with it. So you do get the real mix mash, and it feels exactly like a Swiss does at a DLC. So if anyone's sort of preparing for their LCQ, there was a big team at the EU one called Inkless from France that had really heavily picked this Ruby Sapphire list, and they were like, it was really heavily tech for that expected. That kind of worked in a lot of people's favor because it basically knew when you were paired into an Inkless player, and you'd know because they were either wearing like the uniform, the kit, and everything, or it said Inkless in their username on Melee. So you kind of knew you were playing into one. You kind of knew what to expect. I mean, you still had to play against Ruby Sapphire, but you kind of knew what you were expecting from that, so that was pretty fortunate. And then there was a lot of green purple, a lot of purple still trying to feed on the green purple. So there was just really a lot of things going on there. So if you're trying to predict for that, really, I still think bringing what you'd feel most comfortable on is the best idea. And for the channel, because it's basically we only talk about Sapphire still, I would actually pick, if I was to play in the LCQs for NA, if I had to go this week, I'm not going, I'm not attending, by the way. I'd probably pick a no wheel Blue Steel list, and my ideas around that are you're going to have a lot of green steel, which I was actually quite surprised how big the green steel percentage was in the EU one. I thought it was like, the joke is always that green purple is really popular in Europe, and in the States, green steel is very popular, but it turns out that actually green steel is kind of popular here as well. It had like the third biggest meta share in the room, and by a distance from the amber steel one as well, which I would have thought amber steel would have jumped it, but that was on the actual at the EU Continentals thing. But that's still a good representation of what you'd expect to see in the LCQ as well. But I think because No Will has so many good advantages into green steel, I think right now as well with there being a lack of locations into Ruby Amethyst, you can take that matchup as long as they're not going to play like 2 or 3 genies on you. And even they do, you can answer some of them with, Broom, grab your swords and stuff like that. I've personally always felt, actually even not favoured, but I've always felt a lot stronger into Ruby Sapphire with No Will. Cheater and Quill is like ramp that I believe even they would like to be doing. They just can't fit it in the list because they can't always optimally follow that line, so they don't play that line in the deck because some games they won't want to do that and they want to ramp on 2 most often. But Chicha into Quill is just a really powerful ramp line, and then you can just start putting Tamatovas, aerials, aerial and a dime, and just basically be faster than them and go over them. And then you've also got cheap things that can quest like Mr. Smee and stuff like that. So I would take that matchup. So the only things I would sort of worry about is green purple, but I just feel like there won't be that much of a green purple representation. Um, in NA, there will be a representation. It will be played. But going from like past DLC results and stuff like that, I just never see the deck pop up there. It never really does amazingly, so I just feel like I wouldn't worry too much about that. Sky, I've been talking to you about this list and like about No Will. It can be better, and you see there's some changes there of Jim Hawkins and Captain Hook, and that's for things into Steel Song. And that's sort of the thing I was going to mention, the changes that have happened since the DLC, since the EU Continentals, is we've got this new Doc Mine Steel Song that's came out. That wasn't really represented like during the EU Continentals. Like no one was playing that, no one really knew what that was. So that's been another thing that sort of we have to think about going forward and take the list for. But the testing sort of has came out that no will the Cheech and no will that we had in set 5 is still good. It's still a very strong deck, like the standard, the way you'd run it standard. But you've also got lots of tools where you can shore up matchups where you want them to. So if you want to shore up the what's it called, the Doc Mind build, you can put more Jim Hawkins in if you like. I've put more Magic Brooms in because I want to be a little bit better into Ruby Amethyst, and sometimes I'm just noticing I'm lacking 2 damage to finish off a Genie after grab your swords, fire the cannons, or Simba. And Cheetah can buff the Broom as well and take out a Genie. So I've gone for some more Magic Brooms. Captain Hook is actually pretty good on the draw versus any of these low to the ground decks. You can throw in the purple steels and the green purples on top of the steel songs. Because if they're going to open Daisy instead of a Cinderella, Captain Hook's actually going to stick. And then you can put other things around, and just he's very good maths. He's just another body on the board. He's also not bad into the Ruby matchups because he will be another thing questing. Red Ruby Amethyst have got a lot of Tremaine effects and stuff like that. So yeah, just having you can play with that numbers around as well. This is not a finite list, I'd say as well. This is me sort of playing around with the numbers because I'm trying to shore it up mainly for Ruby Amethyst because as I'm not doing NA Continentals, I will be doing store champs here, so I'm kind of getting my list ready for that. But I think exactly how this is, and I of course released the guide as well, and it's not far off that list. You just sort of play around the numbers, but the core idea of the Cheetah Quill into that top end with the Simba and the Hades. And the only thing that's different here from most Blue Steel lists is there is no Cogsworth in here. We kind of jump that turn 5. We use that turn 5 to just basically do anything else. Because most turns will be Cheetah, Quill, Hiram, or Tinkerbell. And then we'll get to the point where we're playing Simba and Hades and Tamatoa. And besides Cogsworth being like safe ink, he pretty much doesn't do anything in the list. So he's been cut for a bit. But I think as well, like I say, the way that you build Blue Steel is you could have a lot of tools. So I definitely think that you could um, make room for him again. I think there's some cards in there. I'm quite heavy on the 2 drops and the 1 drops. You could clearly remove some of them and put in Cogsworth if you wanted it for like say the Steel Song or the Green Purple matchup because Ward and Resist is very good into those challenge based decks. But right now I've just sort of cut him and he doesn't feel that great. So I think if I was to do it the Continentals, this is the NA Continentals, the LCQ, sorry. This is definitely a list I'd go for. I still think Cheetah's pretty good, and the fact that you might be like, I need Cheetah for all these Ruby matchups, and then you get a matchup versus Steel Song Control or something like that, and you're like, Cheetah's not very good here. But because it's a best of 3, you can sort of afford to have a weaker game 1 where your mulligan isn't that strong because you don't know what you're mulliganing against. But you still probably won't lose. But you probably don't want to play Cheetah on 2. You want to play Jim Hawkins on 2. But then you can use that knowledge that you've learned in that game 1 and carry it over to game 2 and 3 and perform a bit better in those games because especially in this in no wheel and in wheel as well. Let's be honest. Our mulligans are very tight. We want specific things at specific times. Like Quill is always a must, and we'd like a popsicle as well. 2 drop is good, and we're sometimes not picky on the 2 drop. But it's being able to know what you're mulliganing against, so you can do those really good mulligans. Where it's like, they're gonna um, play a Daisy on 1, so I really want to put a Jim Hawkins on 2, so I can deal that and then Quill and remove it. So I think it really does lend itself to a best of 3. This is sort of the pick, yeah, exactly the pick I would go for if you were doing the LCQ or even the Continentals. I think there's a lot of benefits there, and most people in the Continentals, because it's a room full of people have sort of made their name playing a specific deck. You might be able to tell what the opponent's going to play when you pair it into them. because it'd be like, oh hey, you're the Sapphire Steel guy. I mean, I've had that like too much. Even have that at store champs. So you can be like, if it's Candio, you might be like, oh, I know this is going to be a Doc Mind Steel Song thing or something like that, or another like a No I'm Not. This is going to be RP. So you do get a bit more knowledge in those best of twos in a tighter room, which means that you can mulligan a bit better and you don't lose out on one game because you didn't mulligan properly or you looked for the wrong things. So that's a lot of rambling about how to mulligan for this deck for no reason at all. I don't know why I did that, but it's definitely why I think it's a very good pick for the LCQ, and I would take it into the NA as well if I was doing the NA event. But outside of sort of Sapphire Steel, of course, this is the decks that made it to the day two. I think um, what would change though with this high percentage of Emerald Amethyst, I'm going to again make the comment that for some reason, the Americans don't particularly like to play a lot of green purple. That could change. I could be completely wrong. This is all meta predictions, but it seems like they don't particularly love playing that deck, so it doesn't get as much representation. I think as well, green still will have a stronger representation with a lot more player. I mean, look, we've gone from 18% down to 2% there from day one to day two. The only big jump is the Ruby Amethyst one, but I can mention that as well. Green still gets a lot more play there. It's a lot more popular there. There's a lot more veteran players there as well. And I think if they're able to shore up that matchup that they sort of lost this set, which was the Emerald Steel versus Emerald Amethyst, they sort of lost a lot of win percentage into that. I think you're going to see a lot more Emerald Steel again. And Doc Steel song like mines because the mines are using ping damage from the mines and they flood a lot. I think they take that matchup into Emerald Amethyst. So to be honest with you, I don't think Emerald Amethyst is the right pick for this event now. It was very, very strong at the start of the set, but it feels like we've had enough time to mold and find different ways to play the game and different decks and stuff like that. So I definitely don't think it is. I would say, again, Ruby Amethyst is probably just the utter powerhouse of there's going to be enough of them and it's going to be consistent enough in someone's run that it could just make it and win the entire event. I don't think that's out of the ordinary. So I think Ruby Amethyst as well is another good pick outside of sort of blue steel talk, because that's just what the channel does. And Ruby Sapphire is going to be everywhere. Amethyst Steel, I think, is always going to have representation, but it's never going to win anything. I'm going to eat my words probably if it wins something this weekend. Yeah, it seems to always be represented, but it never wins. It seems to be good enough to be represented and make cuts, but never good enough to win anything. So that's my comment on Amethyst Steel. But yeah, it's just interesting to see the data sort of tracks over. The main thing that I want to take away is that the Ruby Amethyst is consistently a good powerhouse. It seems to do quite well and always basically like outprove itself. I don't know how to describe it. It seems to like if you see a lot of the threads and stuff like that, people doom the deck, say it's dead, say it's old, say it doesn't work, hasn't changed since set two, and then it goes and wins EU Continentals and has like the best meta percentage swap from day two to day one, or day one to day two. So yeah, I think definitely if you're a Ruby Amethyst player and you're watching this, don't know why you're watching this because we don't really do Ruby Amethyst stuff, but yeah, it's worth mentioning that deck's also a really strong choice as well. I think most likely the big thing that's going to go win it. I won't talk about too much what I predict to actually win it. This is more preparing for it. But because I'm going to do that with Alphos on our little podcast that we're doing, if no one knew that I did that, so that's out there as well, and an episode should be out this week over on his channel. But yeah, definitely if you're going to the LCQ and for some reason it's the last week and you haven't thought of a list, my bet and most confident choice would be on No Wheel Blue Steel, being the thing that wins it. There's a lot there that works. If you find the ratios right, if you find it works well for you, if it runs smoothly for you, it's definitely just a really strong choice. I don't think Chichu Wheel fell off at the start of the set. It's just um, people wanted to try new things out, and so did I. I built a completely different blue steel list than what we've usually seen. But I don't think I would bring this to that event. I think we're out of that early meta fun where people can explore things. We're down to these very concrete lists, which you do get at the end of a set. And let's be honest, set six has been out for a while. It's been in quite intense testing as well because everyone's getting ready for both Continentals. So the meta moves very fast on this list. Store champs lists are going to be so refined because we're going to have so much data to basically run off to like the biggest tournaments of the year, forming like the most tight lists of the set basically. So yeah, I think I'd be most confident bringing this list on the day. And yeah, but just anyways watching that and going, have fun.